Hey everyone, it's Brandy and welcome back to my channel, Brandy Janae's Bookshelf. As you can tell from the title of the video, today I am going to be going over the books that I read during the first half of the month. So this is actually going to be a little bit over the first half because I'm counting everything that I've read up until this point. At the kind of halfway point of the month, I read a lot. I'm surprised by how much I got through. However, on the flip side, I haven't gotten through as many of the books from my actual deck of TBR as I thought I would have at this point. So for the rest of the month, obviously my big goal is to work on that. So I'm thinking about swapping some things out, which I'll save that for the end part of the video. First, let's go through the books that I read and quick reviews on those that I felt like I need to talk about. I know that it's been a while since I've done a full mid-month wrap up, so if you haven't seen one of these before, I do talk about the books in the order that I finished them, and then if you're looking for books in rating order, those are usually in my end of the month wrap-ups, which should hopefully be in the first week of November for this month. With that being said, let's go ahead and start off with the first thing I finished, which it was Magic Strikes by Alona Andrews. This is book 3 in the Kate Daniel series. If you know absolutely nothing about the series, it is taking place in a slightly futuristic Atlanta. A long time ago, when the world was first becoming, there was this civilization that was built on magic. Everything had to do with magic, and it was just so much magic in the world that there was a shift to technology to kind of balance out that reign of magic. Then there came a point in time where there was so much technology, too much technology, where there was a shift back to magic. But now in the current day, there's a shift back and forth between magic and technology. That's kind of the setup of the world in general, and we're following this character named Kate Daniels, who has this very secretive past. She doesn't really tell anyone where she's from, or at least at the very beginning she doesn't tell anyone about herself because she's pretty much in hiding. And to make a living, she's working as a mercenary, as part of the mercenary guild. And in the very first book in the series, her guardian, or the guy who used to be her guardian, ends up being murdered. So she tasks herself with trying to figure out who killed him and why. And that kind of leads into her getting involved with the shapeshifters of Atlanta, as well as the people who are that's a group of people who control vampires. Basically, it's a whole magic setup system thing that goes on that it makes a lot more sense when you read it, because it goes into quite a lot of detail, and it is kind of gone over briefly at the beginning of each book, so that if you forget anything or something didn't fully stick, you have another opportunity to go through that again. So like I said, after that whole explanation, this is book 3 in the series. The main plot line of this story is that Derek, who is a werewolf who Kate is introduced to in the first book, he ends up in trouble where he's nearly dead, and because of this, an investigation, it leads to her joining this Midnight Games, which is something that has pretty much been made illegal, and she ends up having to get involved. It's a lot going into it. I don't really want to tell too much because it's honestly best to kind of go into this. So if you like kind of mysteries, I would say cop shows but with paranormal aspects, this is a good series to go into, because each book there's always something going on, and then once you dig a little deeper, it's always something more than the surface level. So it's always something to reveal as you continue on with the story, and that's one of the things that I really enjoy about this. Also, like I said, it does have those paranormal aspects, so I do enjoy that element of it as well. This was one of the more exciting books in the series. I feel weird saying that because I feel like each book has its own thing that obviously makes it what it is, but I felt like this was one of those books where the stakes were so high and it like constantly had me wanting to read more. I think this was the first book of this time around rereading that I read physically the entire time. So I read this actual copy the entire time. I didn't take any breaks with audio or anything like that. So it took me quite a bit to get through it, but I think it gave me a better appreciation for it because I took my time with it and didn't just rush through with the audio. I have read this so many times, so I like go through different thoughts each time. I don't think I will ever dislike the series at any point. I'm just gonna leave that here. If you haven't read anything from the series, I would suggest you at least try it out. It's one that I enjoy. I understand that it's not going to be something that everyone loves, but I really love this series. I don't remember what I gave the rating for originally, because if you don't know, if I read a book already and documented it on Goodreads, I decided that I'm not going to change any of my ratings. I'm just going to like re-rate it for myself just so I know where I'm feeling at this time. I put this through Call Pal. It got 5 stars. The next book that I finished in October was Magic Mourns, also by Alana Andrews. This is 3.5 in the Kate Daniel series, and this one is following Andrea Nash and Raphael. Once again, if you haven't read anything from the series, Andrea is a character that is introduced in the very first book, Magic Bites. She is a knight of the order, but she's currently been benched basically. And this novella is kind of the true start to her and Raphael's relationship, I would say. So at the start of this novella, Andrea is actually filling in for Kate. If you've read book 3 with the ending, you will know why. Kate ended up getting pretty injured and she's on medical leave pretty much. So Andrea is kind of filling in for her, but she hasn't had a whole lot of luck because when people call in, they want Kate and they just like, I'll call back later. There's a call for Kate. Andrea obviously answers and she gets notified about a shapeshifter running from this big dog, and the shapeshifter is on fire or something like that. So she decides to go check it out, and she ends up getting involved with this mystery with Raphael because his mother's meat, his body was stolen from the funeral home and is being guarded, or something is going on with this 3-headed dog. So they end up having to work together to try to figure out what's going on and solve that issue. Basically pretty much what Kate would do in the normal series, except I felt like obviously a bit more simplified because there was only so many pages. As far as this one, I had like pros and cons to this. I really enjoyed the story, the plot, like the relationship, everything that comes along with the story, because it was giving me a lot of what I rate the series for. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it. However, on the flip side, I was a little frustrated with the fact that so much of the beginning of this was taken up by kind of rehashing the way the world is set up and giving an introduction into our characters. Now, I feel bad saying that because I understand that this was originally published as part of one of those like novella bind-ups where, you know, you get different stories from different series, multiple authors all in one. So that's why I think they did it. But having like just finished reading the full-length novel, book 3 of the series, I didn't need a full recap of how the world works, and I felt like it took up quite a bit of the little bit of pages that we had, and it made me not want to get through that part to read the rest of it. And I think that's probably going to be a complaint of mine for each of the books going forward, because even in the regular novels it does the same thing, and I get frustrated because I'm like, I'm literally like, I just read it, I don't need to read it again. I did still really enjoy the story. This one ended up getting 4 stars for me. The next book that I have to talk about that I finished was The Crow Prince by Holly Black, and this is book 1 in the Folk of the Air series, I believe is what the series is called. So in this story, we're following this character named Jude, who is pretty much trying to make her way in the fairy realm. At the beginning of the story, she was taken along with her twin sister back to the fairy world after her mother and her father were killed. Now we're following her. I think she's like 16 or something, and she's doing her best to try to make it as a guard. She's not really doing the best, and a lot of conspiracy, a lot of things happen to the point where she is trying to do her best to put herself in a position of power in this fairy world as a human. That was probably a terrible description, but I'm sure that most likely you have already heard of this series. This was actually a reread for me. Long story short, this was me doing a reread so that I can prep for book 3, because that ended up getting chosen out of one of my TBR jars. I don't know if I really have any new thoughts. I was kind of just reading it just to get through it. I think the first time that I gave it around, and honestly every time that I've read it, I don't know if I read it more than twice before this time, I gave it 3 stars. It ended up getting 3 stars again. Moving on to book number 4 that I finished in October, which was After the Rain Volume 3 by Jun Mayuzuki. And I'm not sure if you have not or have not seen me talking about this before, but this is like a omnibus edition. The whole series is, so there's actually 2 volumes in one. This series is following this character named Tachibana, who is the character who is on all of the front covers. She was on her school's track team, but after an injury she has not gone back or attempted to go back, and now she is working as a waitress at this family restaurant. And in that time she ends up developing a crush on her manager, and this is pretty much just following her life as she goes through those feelings and trying to figure out what she wants to do with the rest of her life, because she feels like she can never go back to track. I don't know how to talk about this because it's like really just like everyday life, and typically this isn't the type of thing that I would enjoy reading, but for whatever reason this is like very inviting, and when I start reading it I don't want to stop until I'm done, and then after that I'm just like, okay, now I want more. This one ended up getting 4 stars for me after putting it through Cophouse. Moving on, the next thing that I finished was Mashley Magic and Muscles Volume 1 by Hajime Komoto, and this is I believe a shonen, yes, a shonen manga that's following this character named Mash, who is a non-magical person living in a magic ruled world. He ends up going into town one day because he wants to go buy these cream puffs because that's like his favorite thing ever, and it's discovered that he doesn't have any magic, and this bounty hunter ends up coming after him, and he gives him the option of going to enter this magical school and like becoming the top student, and then the money prize, if he wins the money prize and gives it to him, then he'll leave them alone pretty much. I have already talked about this in the video, so I will be linking that as well. So I'm just going to keep my thoughts here very brief. I went into this thinking that I was just like, oh, it's going to be all right. I'm probably going to give it like 3 stars and never think about it again. But I was so wrong. I was so entertained by this. I don't know what it was. It was just, I don't know, it's very charming. I was just like flipping through. I didn't want to stop, and I'm already looking forward to picking up more volumes in the series because it was just so much fun. This one did end up getting 4 stars for me. Moving on to the next book, and I'm actually going to kind of lump like the next 3 things together because we're kind of wrapping up my Kate Daniels rereads slash new reads of this month. So the first one of those that I'm going to talk about is Magic Bleeds by Alona Andrews. This is book 4 in the series, and the main plot line of this one is that there's this magical person, being, whatever you want to call it. I'm not quite sure. I know what it is, but I don't want to like once again give the entire thing away. But this magical person slash being comes into the picture, and it seems to be hitting bars in Atlanta. Their go cause a lot of chaos, and the person who ends up getting killed is infested with some type of disease that is like magically growing like at an exponential rate. It's a lot more going on once again, but we're gonna leave it at that because I don't want to give away the whole story. I feel weird saying like I think this one was better than the last because each book just builds upon it, you know, builds upon a previous thing. It has something new, but it's also building along the background story, which is something that I love. You know, when you're reading series, you not only want new things, but you want something that's connecting the rest of everything else pretty much. Like if you're watching a story, like a TV show, I like watching like cop shows like NCIS LA. That's what I'm currently watching. You know, each episode has like its major like plot line for that. But you know how it has the family and friendships and love lives and everything like that going on in the background that continues across episodes. Like, that's basically what the series is, and I love having those elements because it's a reason for you to keep reading, obviously, besides just having that main point. This will end up getting 5 stars for me reading for this time around. And then after that, when I finished up the current POV short story collection, this is basically scenes from the first 4 books that are told from Curran's point of view, and this is actually written by Gordon Andrews, which is part of the Alona Andrews group. If you don't know anything about the authors, it's like a married couple and their name is Alona Andrews, but it's like Alona Andrews and Gordon Andrews, they just write together. Anyway, this one is specifically written by Gordon, at least according to the cover that they released for this one. But yeah, like I said, we're just revisiting certain scenes from each of the first 4 books from Curran's point of view. I enjoyed having this perspective because, like I said, I haven't read these before, because it gave me a different look at, more so, I think the romance is what really drew me in. I felt like the romance between Kate and Curran kind of happened very quickly, and it just seemed to, like, one book they were kind of like joking around with each other, and the next book they were like, boom, we're a couple. And I was just like, how? But seeing things from Curran's perspective, I was just like, okay, he was looking at it at a very different point of view. So in this world, shapeshifters have this thing where they give like someone that they're romantically interested in like food, that seeing is like, okay, like I'm actually courting you, this is like the first steps of you becoming my mate. And like Kate not realizing that's what was going on at first, and it was just like little things like that we got to see from this perspective that I personally wasn't paying attention to all of that, because I feel like that's something more so that you will notice on a reread, because yes, it's explained pretty quickly after that, but it's like you're not, at least I can't speak for everyone, I just wasn't really thinking that far into it. But like I said, seeing things from Curran's perspective really helped. Seeing like the romance didn't like just start randomly in one book. So I really enjoyed that, and also it just gave us a look of how he viewed the world as well as how he viewed Kate, which in a lot of series we don't really get that often. Like usually, you know, you get one person's perspective, that's who you're following throughout the entire book, and that's it. One thing that I would love is to like kind of get like a random glimpse of like someone outside of them too, and like see how the two, like Kate and Curran, work together. I doubt we'll ever get that unless we get that like in Julie's series. But as of right now, I really enjoyed having this little point of view of certain scenes, and this one ended up getting 5 stars. I didn't realize that. And the final thing that I have to talk about that I read from this month is Magic Dreams, and this one is actually a novella. This is 4.5, a novella that is following Jim and Dolly. I think so far this is probably my favorite novella because it had the most new things to it. If you read the series, then you know Jim is the like head of pack security, pretty much, like of all of the Atlanta pack security. There is something that happens where there is a specific like security house, I don't know what to call it exactly. They have like little safe houses around the city, and the pack members that were working there, they like went missing. Jim went to the house to try to figure out what was going on after hearing from someone else, and like he ended up passing out, and now he knows that there's something wrong, but he can't figure out what. So he goes to Dolly because she has some knowledge on like magical things, magical elements that a lot of people either don't. I think besides Dolly, Kate is usually the one that holds the most knowledge about different magical backgrounds. And it turns out that there's this whole new enemy that comes from like the Asian sector of magic. This was just so fascinating to me because I don't think this section of people were ever mentioned in the main part of the series, which I feel like is a huge disservice to this, because this could have took a whole nother route. Like this could have added at least a couple books, at least one whole other book to the series. Now I get why it wasn't done, because there was really no reason for Kate to be involved in that, but after reading this novella, I feel like it could have been something that could have been like a much bigger problem, where Dolly could have been like a huge part. Like Kate still would have been the focus, but Dolly could have been included in that, and I just like, I wanted a whole book for this. There was just so much that happened in this novella. Like, I don't want to give it away because it's literally under 100 pages, and there was so much more that went on to it. We found out about different magical creatures and like all these other dangers. There's just so much that I loved about this. Like, even if it wasn't focused on Kate, maybe like Kate could have been called in for some extra muscle to protect Dolly during a scene, I would have loved to have a whole book of this. And I'm really sad that I'm pretty sure there's not. This one ended up getting 5 stars because it was just so good. Like I said, I'm being super vague, I know, but this is something that if you have not read it already and you've read the series, if you don't read any other novellas, I would recommend you check this one out because it's so good. And like I said, it adds different elements. Moving on, the next book that I need to talk about is Pride Mate by Jennifer Ashley. In this story or world, however you want to look at it, there are shapeshifters that are living in like these communities, and they have agreed to be collared in order to live in these specific communities that exist for them. And at the start of the story, we're following this character named Kim, who is a human, and I think she's a defense attorney. And this shapeshifter is accused of killing his girlfriend, and she doesn't believe he does it, so she's trying to do her best to get him off. She sets up a meeting for a shapeshifter in one of these communities. His name is Liam, to try to speak with him and to try to figure out how she can get him off. And that ends up getting her caught up in this whole shapeshifter madness that's going on. That was super vague. Once again, I feel like my descriptions in these videos are like a bit of a mess. Anyway, you know how sometimes when you have those books that like you just don't click with the characters, like you don't care enough about them to really care about their story? This is kind of what happened with me in this book. It was just something about these characters that like didn't give me enough to want to be invested in them. I think it's the best way for me to say that. I'm gonna give, or I did end up giving this one 3 stars. It was all right. I would probably, like, if it was my decision moving forward, I probably wouldn't continue on. But I'm gonna at least give book 2 a try because, like I said, that one was the one that I specifically heard about. The second to last book that I have to talk about in this video is Dig Fight Island Volume 1 by Reboon Ike. This is set on like a set of I think like 8 different islands. I can't remember what the name of the group of islands was called, but there are like different clans on each island. And on this island, every 4 years they have this competition to decide who's the next king. And as you can expect at the start of this story, it's time for a new competition. Long story short, this competition is basically like 8 different men getting together, and they're trying to get each other off, and the person who lasts the longest or the last one standing is the winner. And the winner can either become the king for the next 4 years, or they can choose the king, and that person will obviously be the king for the next 4 years. Not really focused on one character in particular, but we do spend a little bit more time with one specific person because he comes back. He was studying abroad for I think the last 4 years or so, and he's back because he was chosen as his clan's chosen one to be able to compete. He's back, and he has this new technique that no one apparently on the island knows. Besides that being like the plot point, this is pretty much like erotica. It ended up getting 3 stars for me, mostly because there wasn't a whole lot of storyline. I will say though that I'm interested in seeing volume 2 because I don't know if volume 2 is gonna like skip ahead 4 years and then it's gonna be the same thing. I have a feeling that it's not. Like, it might be a little bit more story going on, so I probably will try out volume 2 just to see where it's going. But as far as this one, it was just okay. I wouldn't like say, yeah, go pick this up right now because you're gonna love it. If you don't mind reading this type of thing, then you might enjoy it. But as of right now, that's what it is, that's what I got, and we're gonna move on. Alright, and the final thing that I have to talk about in this video, which is honestly past the halfway point, but I figured it's already done now, so let me just go ahead and talk about it now, and that is Girl Got Game Volume 4 by Shizzy Rossino. If you haven't already heard me talking about it, this is following this girl named Kyo, whose father enrolls her into the school as a boy so that she can play on the boys basketball team, and now she's stuck with trying to disguise herself so that she doesn't get discovered and obviously kicked out of the school. At the end of volume 3, her roommate actually ends up like verifying or finding out for sure that she's a girl, and he gets upset and talks about how he can't live with her anymore after finding that out. So she decides that she's gonna run away because she has nowhere else to go. I feel like this time around, like, I'm really more so reading it for nostalgia. I remember really loving the series, so that's why I picked it up. I think it did end up getting 4 stars with Kaw Pow, but like I said, I think a lot of that has to do more so with nostalgia than if I was reading this around for the first time around. So if you're deciding to pick this up, if you're able to find all the series, like, you might not enjoy it as much. So yeah, that's 11 books that I have finished so far by the 18th of the month. Let me actually go ahead and go through what I'm currently reading, because I am currently in the middle of a few different things. The first thing that I'm currently in the middle of is The Never List by D.L. White. This is an adult romance. It's actually like a Black romance. I might be reading this one into next month, honestly, but I'm not gonna make a huge deal about it. The other thing that I'm currently in the middle of is Skip and Loafer Volume 1 by Misaki Takamatsu. This is one of the ones that came in my August Manga Spice Cafe box. After that, I will be also trying to read The Great Jahi Will Not Be Defeated. I don't know if I'll get to this one today, but this is one of my next up in case you guys are curious. And then I do also plan on starting Ace of Spades today. But yeah, that's what I'm currently reading. And then what's the next up on my TBR. The only other thing that I did want to mention is that I'm thinking about possibly switching something out, which I thought might be a possibility at the beginning of the month when I did my deck of TBR. If you remember, my very first prompt was to finish a series, and when I remembered, I meant like finish a series that's already completed. So because of this, I decided that I was going to try to do manga. When I decided on that, I was like, okay, well, I have this whole series that I want to read, that I have the entire thing, but that is 5 volumes. And at this point, I don't know if I have enough time to read. Like, I know for sure that I can read 5 volumes. I can read that in a day. But with all the rest of the reading that I need to do, I don't know if that's fair to myself to end up doing that. I still have it taken out. It's on the shelf with the rest of my TBR books for the month. So it's still a possibility. So if I have enough time, I will read those. But in case I don't have enough time, I think that I will go ahead and switch that out for After the Rain Volume 4 and Volume 5. These are the last 2 volumes in the series, and honestly, it's still almost as much as the 5 volumes because these are bind up. So it's 2 volumes in each of these, so it's technically 4 volumes. And this is like 600 pages, I think, between the two, maybe like 700 pages. But these I usually get through a lot quicker than most of the manga that I read. That's everything that I had to talk about in this video. Let me know down in the comments what are some of the books that you have finished so far. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed, as well as subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys again in the next one. Bye.